podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to the 1905 podcast. Each week, Joe and I bring you our unfiltered takes on the highs, the lows, and everything in between, following the Blues from Gate 13 of the Matthew Harding stand. Let's hit the notes. Isn't it a really weird feeling not to have a midweek Chelsea game? It has been so relentless with Chelsea games, since December, that we've not had a game for about 5 days, and I don't really know what to do with myself. So this is the first time in about 2 months that we're doing a podcast that isn't a review of a game, rather a little bit of a run through of what's been going on and I guess a preview of Saturday's big game against Burnley. So one thing that Joe and I thought might be interesting this week is to give you guys a little bit of a potted history, really, of how we came to be Chelsea fans. And I have the honour of going first. I've always said, or my dad certainly tells me, that I was like one of the luckiest Chelsea fans ever, because I started supporting Chelsea in 93. So it's the start of the 93-94 season. I was 10 years old, taken by my dad to watch Chelsea at Stamford Bridge for the first time. And the reason I say I was so lucky is that I joined really at the start of what many people call like the turning point in Chelsea's fortunes. We just appointed Glenn Hoddle as player manager, as he was back then under Ken Bates. And really, I mean, my dad used to say, he used to say so many times, you don't know how lucky you are. We'd had the best part of 20 years of real ups and downs, and I just caught it on this crazy up. So it wasn't a great team back then, but right from minute one, I had so many amazing memories. We got to the FA Cup final in our first season under Glenn Hoddle. We lost 4-0 to Man United in the final, and we managed to get a ticket the day before through a friend of my dad's, and it was a dismal day. We hit the bar early on through Gavin Peacock, 0-0 at half-time against then champions Man United under Alex Ferguson, and got beaten 4-0 in the second half, and a 10-year-old Chris Sheen was crying in the stadium. It was a dire day, but we did qualify for Europe the next year. So again, even though we had a mid-table Premier League season, we got to the semi-final of the Cup Winners' Cup and a crazy run in Europe, which was so exciting. And then the following year, the signings of Ruud Gullit and Mark Hughes, and particularly Ruud Gullit, just this new era of Chelsea was sort of opening before our eyes. And I often kind of hark back to that late 90s, or mid to late 90s era really has just been so special. And of course, what followed was the likes of Gianluca Vialli, Roberto Di Matteo, Gianfranco Zola, many, many more. And we finally started to win trophies. And it was just an amazing time really to grow up watching Chelsea. You can imagine me kind of in those sort of early teenage years just being on this amazing adventure really with Chelsea. And then culminated obviously in 2003 with Roman Abramovich buying the club and everything that came with that. It was amazing time. I used to go with my dad very regularly. He's not around anymore, sadly, but you know, to this day, going to Stamford Bridge has never been quite the same without my dad, I have to say. And it was always so special, and so many good memories watching Chelsea home and away, as we often did. Went to plenty of great away days back in the day as well. And you know, it was truly a bonding experience for us. And you know, it's just an amazing thing when you catch that bug, like everyone listening I'm sure has, being a Chelsea fan. The thing that always stuck out to my dad, and he used to tell this story a lot, was I think we'd been going this is the first season I started going. I was young. I'd been going to a few games and winning and losing. And then we lost a game to Arsenal early on in my Chelsea supporting era. And I walked out the ground with him and I was like, oh, I'm really upset about that, Dad. That's really hurt. And he could see how gutted I was. And he said, we've got you. We've got you. You've got the bug now. When it hurts when you lose, as we all know, that is the turning point. And God, it never goes away from you, does it? That feeling when you lose a game. So yeah, loads of memories along the way, and still get that buzz every time we go back to Stamford Bridge and I walk out. The smells don't change. The smells of the onions and the horse shit around the ground doesn't change, and I still get that buzz walking in the ground. So yeah, lots of amazing memories. I live in London and have my lovely wife Gabby and two kids who are Millie, who's 9, and Frankie, who is 5. And Frankie is, of course, named, unsurprisingly, after Frank Lampard. And Millie often asks if she'd been a boy, what her name would have been. And I say, well, it would have been Frankie, because you would have been first. And I was always going to try and have a kid called Frankie, because he is my Chelsea hero. So there's a bit about me. So actually, there is a little dovetail here, which is that I work in marketing. And Chelsea this week got drawn in the FA Cup to the mighty Wrexham, and what has become very fast probably one of the greatest examples of marketing in football that we've ever seen, with the way that obviously Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, I always feel like I said that name wrong, I think I have done, have really run the club from day one. Obviously the massive TV show, of which I have to say I have always been a big fan and have watched pretty religiously. And I mean, is it the biggest game that Wrexham have had? I said the biggest, probably the highest profile game that they've had since they were owners is against the mighty Chelsea. And a great video went round, if you haven't seen it, on social media, which is of Ryan Reynolds reacting to the draw and finding out that they were home to Chelsea in the FA Cup. And yeah, really cool moment. And what I think is particularly interesting, they've done so many things well, in my opinion, at Wrexham. For one thing, they've always had really cool shirt sponsors, and Chelsea don't have a shirt sponsor at all. I think they had United Airlines when they were in like League Two. It's incredible. They've had TikTok at various points. Don't even know if they've got at the moment, but they have always done their commercial stuff really well. And perhaps if we had a shirt sponsor, we could look at that as an inspiration. But probably more than anything, the TV show and being who they are as personalities is obviously a huge part of this, just naturally. But in terms of fan communication and really understanding what the owner vision is for the club, there's probably no better example in the history of football that we've seen than what those guys are doing. And people will be, and I understand there'll be skeptics out there who don't really believe in what they're doing, don't think it's right. And, you know, that's just what happens when you're successful running a sports club. But the results on the pitch have been, to be honest, just incredible. The level of consistency has been unbelievable. But I think what you would have to love as a fan is just having these owners that you can just see in their eyes and their reactions that they are bought in as much as you are and just really want the team to succeed. And you can kind of see the workings as it happens. And I've said it so much about the Chelsea owners. I think Joe and I, probably more than most, I guess, outlets, if you want to call us that, out there, have been really supportive and maybe defensive at times of the ownership, and given them time and understanding that is a long tail picture that Chelsea are on to try and be successful on the pitch and get us back to where we want to be. We've done a lot of that. And I always say the club could do so much by just coming out and speaking to the fans and being better at communicating kind of the workings and why certain decisions are made, all those kind of things. And they promised us that when they took over. It just hasn't really happened at all yet. And I think that's such a shame. And unfortunately, the longer it goes on, the kind of less likely it is to happen. I think if Todd and Igbali had come out, you know, right from, so I don't know why I've given him his surname, Todd Burnley and Begdal Igbali had come out, you know, early on and done kind of a nice little interview where they looked down the lens and spoke to the fans, I think it would have immediately bought them, in my opinion, a bit of favour. Likewise, the sporting directors who, you know, couldn't tell you what they sound like. You know, you see their faces all the time, but you don't know what they sound like. I just think communication is not rocket science. Sometimes just tell people what you're doing. But yeah, big game. That will be a really high profile game. And obviously for Chelsea, on paper at least, and let's hope we don't come back to regret this, a really good draw and a good chance for us to get into the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. And there are more all-prem ties, so the FA Cup is kind of tightening out to be, you know, a good chance for us to do something interesting. Champions League was back on this week, which is why we have a week off, because we obviously automatically qualified. So just shows how much of a fixture pile-up that would have been. And kind of forgot PSG won last night. Very likely that it'll be either them or Newcastle that Chelsea face in the next round. And do you know what? I probably would rather PSG, if I'm being honest. I know that might sound insane, but I just hate all English Champions League ties. I've always have done ever since playing against Liverpool back in the era of Ghost Goal, and obviously Man United when we lost in 2008. And we've come on the right side of a lot of all English ties as well. I think we beat Liverpool as many times as they beat us, and we've done all right, really. But I just hate playing an English team in Europe. Well, one, I think there's an element of it's not as special as playing, big European teams are. But when you do lose, it's the worst, isn't it? Like, you never really hear the end of it. It's always going to be part of the legacy. So, yeah, I would take PSG and a repeat of hopefully what we did in the summer against them. But either way, it'll be a big night. In terms of some of the news around the club, nothing major, really. I think there's quite a lot of transfer stories going around. It's funny that we spoke about Nicholas Jackson last time out in the pod because, again, a lot of talk whether he will come back to the club in the summer. Again, a long way to go there. We'll have to wait and see. And Chelsea were linked quite strongly this week to a centre-back that Joe has been talking about on the pod for well over a year, I think, when this name first came up, which is Murillo at Forest. Joe's been a big fan of both the Nottingham Forest centre-backs over the last year or so, and I think Murillo was always the more likely one, really, because of his age. I think he's 23. And you think bringing him in the summer, if the rumours are true, and obviously the price won't be small, but there is a chance Forest go down, which means the price would come down a little bit, would give Chelsea another really strong centre-half. He's a proper beast of a player, obviously Premier League proven, which is not always the case when we buy players. And you bring him in alongside Colwill, Mamadou Sarr, who, if he finishes the season well, alongside some of the others that we've already got, and you think actually maybe then that is a more solid group and we can feel a little bit more assured. So we'll see how that one plays out. It's early days. It's rumour mill time, isn't it, with not much football going on. So, yeah, all to be taken with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but we will wait and see. As for me, we're looking forward to the Burnley game this weekend. It's an absolute must-win. Burnley have been pretty ranked bad, haven't they, really, this year under Scotty Parker. They've won 4 games in the league all season, 2 at home, 2 away, averaging not far off 3 goals conceded away from home per game. So it really is a chance for Chelsea to get back to winning ways in the league, build on what was a decent performance away at Hull, and hopefully get on the front foot and just keep this good run that we are under going, really. I think making Stamford Bridge a fortress again is so important. The good Chelsea sides, good Chelsea heroes, that's always been the case. And it probably went a little bit under the radar that we've been pretty bad under Enzo Maresca at home this year. The home form was really poor. It was away from home, actually, where we were a little bit more consistent and picked up some of our best results. At home, we were just drawing and losing far, far too many games, and often from winning positions, as we've talked about many times on the pod. So important to just make Stamford Bridge a fortress, come out, be on the front foot, and keep us squeezing up in those league table positions. So it's a big one. I'd love to see that front line again that we saw start the game against Leeds. I think, to be honest, generally the team that we saw against Leeds is basically not far off what I'd love to see. That front line of João Pedro, Esteval, and Cole Palmer, with Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo and Santos, I just think that is putting, in my mind, all of our best players on the pitch at the same time. So I'd love to see that. That will be tricky because Pedro Neto has sort of just got a hat-trick. So will he feel like he's got to start him? But who knows? I think there's a good argument to kind of maintain the consistency of what we had before that game. And then you're looking at Reece James, obviously starts against Hull. You think he'll be fit to start, hopefully. And obviously Hato at left back. With centre backs will be interesting because you'd expect it to be Fofana and Chalobah, and that's probably what it will be, and probably is the right thing for it to be. But Mamadou Sarr, as we've mentioned in the last pod, has definitely done enough in just that cameo start against Hull to say that he's here to play. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, the teams, as I mentioned before, the team's starting to get a bit closer to 8 or 9 of those names should be playing in all of the important games for Chelsea now to the end of the season. And I think a little bit more consistency in team selection is the thing that all of us have been crying out for. But yeah, Joe, I'll hand over to you. Give us a little bit on your intro to Chelsea life. Started a bit before me, I know that. And yeah, what are you looking forward to in the coming week?
Welcome back to another episode of the 1905 podcast. And yes, I think Chris and I have both been basically at it for what seems like an eternity now in terms of podcast recordings. We've done a lot. And I won't lie, when we played Wolves away recently, we won 3-1. The game was so bad, Chris and I had to message each other and just say, do you know what? I think this is going to be a short podcast this week because the performance was, I mean, it wasn't terrible from Chelsea. They got the job done, but nothing happened in the game. Wolves gave up. We pretty much gave up. And we were like, oof, we're going to struggle to get some content out of this. But I think we've soldiered on, and luckily the football has been pretty decent under Liam Rosenior. I think we both keep wanting to say Enzo Maresca. It's been such an ingrained thing for the last 18 months. We both, every time we go to say Liam Rosenior, it doesn't quite sound right yet. But yeah, we've been flat out with the podcast, and we really wanted to give everybody a good flavour of what's going on behind the scenes, a good flavour of obviously the squad redevelopment, the players that have improved, the players that have maybe not impressed, and just given a general feel of how we've been feeling ourselves. I've sort of had a real bad emotional moment, I think, in the last few weeks leading up to Enzo Maresca's demise. I'm really unsure how that's all played out. It doesn't sit quite right with me that he has maybe manufactured his way out of the club. And in a way, if that's what happened and he didn't take a lot of money for leaving to be in a position to take another Premier League job, then I'm kind of quite pleased that he left, because I think I was really struggling because I couldn't see him changing his philosophy on playing certain players, and whether or not he was having arguments behind the scene with the sporting directors with regards to playing time to certain people. I felt like he took it to extremes, and then this constant playing of Badiashile and Tosin, for example, was really getting me down. I'm just like, I can't believe that we are being forced to watch this crap. So yeah, I think that emotional roller coaster of him leaving and Rosenior joining the club and not knowing what we were going to see from him. And I think we have to caveat Rosenior with, he's a young manager, a new manager, not been in the job that long in terms of his managerial career. And we may be praising him at times, but we really don't know what the future holds for him. We hope he does well, because if he does well, Chelsea do well. And I think Chris and I both like the idea of a Londoner managing the club. We can understand everybody says there's no fluff around him. He shoots straight from the hip, and we can understand, I think, his reasons for doing certain things, and he explains that stuff very well, much like Thomas Tuchel did when he joined the club. He was really refreshing and explained his tactics and the reason why he brought players on and took players off, etc. after matches. And I think we've really been keen to sort of find out what an English manager could do at this football club. We've had Frank Lampard, we've had Graham Potter of late, etc. But obviously Chelsea's managers over the length of the last 20-odd years, 25 years, have all been pretty much foreign, and that's completely fine. They've all been, for the most part, they've all been fantastic, and they've taken Chelsea to the very, very top. But it was just nice, I think, to have a guy come in, and he feels like a safe pair of hands at the moment, Liam Rosenior. I don't feel like the team are panicking underneath him. I think he's got a lot of his team already kind of buying into his ideas and his theories, and I think even little things like small tweaks, you don't really see this inverted fullback thing happening quite so much anymore. You're seeing a lot more overlapping runs from fullbacks willing to cross the ball, when a bit like Aspilicueta used to do in a way. The ball would be rolled back to him, and opposed to him having a touch and looking to pass backwards and inside or whatever. It was just like, no, we've made that run. You've come up to join the play. And like people like Gusto and Cucurella and Hato and whatnot, they are just delivering the ball into the box now, which is really nice to see. And I think because it's maybe in theory not in vogue to do that, it doesn't mean it's not right. And you see a lot of managers now, a bit like Maresca, where he would have this inverted fullback thing. And in some cases it worked. It wasn't like a completely disastrous system. It was just that it became very predictable. Everybody knew that Cucurella was our inverting fullback, and it became a bit like, oh, if he's marked, then where do we go? We didn't really know what to do with the ball. So I think it's just been a really nice, decent few weeks, and Chris and I have been able to speak about Chelsea in a much more positive light, because it has been, even though some results were half decent. If you remember the Liverpool game at home, we had a very good result there, for example. Barcelona was a good result, for example, but there was a lot of crap in between and afterwards that we just basically felt like we were just chucking games away and throwing points away willy-nilly. And I think it's just been really great that Rosenior's gone, no, this isn't good enough. Like, if we're going to draw at 2-2 at home to Leeds, that's not good enough from 2-0 up and cruising. We should not be dropping those points. And Maresca, I don't think, ever really came out and criticised his team for making errors like that. It was almost just like, trust the process constantly and all this sort of chat. And it was like, it's just getting very dry now. We can't keep trusting the process when you keep throwing away leads. And, the performance levels would be really good one week, and then we'd have 2 weeks of absolute dross. I think what is nice is that because he speaks the way we do, Liam Rosenior that is, you get a feeling of, that's my guy a bit. And I think that, much like what Chris said after the game against Hull at the weekend, where he went and had a beer and a glass of wine with the opposing manager, I completely agree. That shouldn't go out of the game. I think that camaraderie between managers and whatnot has been there for a long, long time, and I don't think it should be removed from the game. It's a fantastic thing to keep doing, and it does take animosity out of the game as well. It takes that a level of bitchiness and nonsense away from a game that might have been very tetchy, or there might have been a dodgy sending off, or, do you know what I mean? It could be anything. There could have been an injury in the game where someone's gone over the ball, but it can be discussed after the game, and the manager can be left in no uncertain terms that things will be rectified their end or whatever. And I think it's just quite nice that if that is what he's going to go and do, and he's going to continue to do that, then that's a fantastic kind of tradition to carry on. I mean, Wenger and Ferguson, I think everybody thought they hated each other, but quite frankly, they did drink and socialise at award ceremonies and after matches, even if the game was tight and maybe in some cases spiteful. There would always be a level of respect afterwards, shake hands and actually have a glass of wine and say, well done today, you deserved it. And it does mean the next time you meet, there isn't quite that level of hatred, particularly amongst the players and managers. I think it's nice to start fresh and wipe the slate clean from the time before, because that game has gone. Chris has briefly obviously discussed himself there about his job and family and whatnot. Yeah, I'll give you my Chelsea history, as it were. I sort of came to games a little bit earlier than Chris. I sort of started going in 1988. My dad took me, 87, 88 was sort of end of John Hollins' era, and the start of Bobby Campbell, when Chelsea were in the old second division then, which was what is now the Championship. And we won that title back in 1988-89 comfortably by, I think we had 99 points. Players like Kerry Dixon, Gordon Jury, Kevin McAllister, they were the ones that really stood out for me. But there was a guy we signed from Feyenoord. At the time, I didn't know we signed him from Feyenoord, but there's a guy called Ken Moncal, and he was a 6'2", enormous centre half. He looked bigger than that, actually. He looked like 6'10", quite frankly. He played huge, and obviously I was a lot smaller. So to me, he always looked massive. But weirdly, he was one of the first players I ever remember. This is a really weird thing to say, but he had black boots. We had these random orange swirls, and I don't know what the brand of boot was, but they were just so standoutish. I just remember him and going, I want those boots, because he just stood out an absolute mile. And yeah, it was just an era of football where Chelsea shouldn't have dropped out of division. What is the old Division 1? They should have been in there, but they did. They fell down the league. There was a lot of trouble with hooliganism. Obviously, Ken Bates was the chairman back then, and I think from memory, the year after we got into the first division, I think our first 6 games were played behind closed doors, or certainly a reduced crowd or something because of crowd trouble. And Ken Bates obviously famously put up those guarded fences to sort of, and I think he even said like, I'm gonna pen my own fans in because there was lots of crowd trouble running on the pitch after games and during games and whatnot. And yeah, it was a bad time for sort of to be a football supporter. It was quite worrying at times. My dad, I can remember him sort of saying, we sat in the family section back then, and he used to stand in the old shed with his friends and family and whatnot, because that was the place to be when you were a young man. But he didn't want me going in there at sort of the age of 5 because obviously it would have been awful for me. But yeah, it was just that feeling of keeping you safe because when you're very young and you're hearing swearing from the terraces and you're hearing songs that were quite near the mark, to say the least, being sung from both sides, both sets of fans, to be fair, home and away fans, was quite a eye-opening experience when you're 5 and 6 and 7, for example. And yeah, I think it was just a very into the lion's den, and a silly little thing, but my dad didn't pay for me, he would pay for himself. And back then the turnstiles used to be kind of where you'd walk in where the statues are now at Chelsea. There was a row of turnstiles there. There wasn't any, you didn't go into the ground and scan your ticket. You just paid basically on the door, but 20 yards out before you even got to the stadium. So I used to run under the turnstile and my dad would pay for one and then we'd go. And often there wouldn't be a seat for me because I hadn't paid. So I used to sit at the back and watch from the concourse. And it was just a weird experience, but I can just remember it vividly. And I think I've mentioned this before, but my dad would buy me a pin badge on the way to the ground. And sometimes we'd have he'd go and have his 10 pints of lager and I'd be outside kicking a football or a makeshift or a makeshift football. Sometimes it was a Coke can that had been stamped on 3 or 4 times, and we used to kick around in a pub car park. It was just a different time, a different era. And there'd be 20 different kids all outside in a pub car park because dads were inside drinking. But you did feel really safe. It sounds mad in today's world where all our kids and family members, we do mollycoddle our children a bit. We do want to keep them safe. We do, people have got phones and all the rest of it. Back then we didn't have any of this stuff, and you just relied on, don't be a twat, basically. Don't leave that car park unattended. Don't go over there. If you don't cross that road, the ball goes in that fence, don't go and get it or whatever. Like you just knew that certain things were taboo and you weren't to do them. And if you did do them, your dad would give you a thick ear. And I think it was just a way of life. And I wasn't the only one. It was everybody that I knew. And sooner or later, my sisters, who were older than me, they both wanted to come because I was going every week, and they used to come along too. Not every game, but to a lot of them, certainly. And a few years later, it paved the way for them to get their own season tickets. Obviously, they're also lifelong Chelsea fans like me, but they would go on their own, and it just become a way of life. I think Chelsea, like all football clubs, if it gets into your blood, it's very, very hard to get it out. And you might want to sometimes go, do you know what? I don't want to go this week. I can't be bothered. But you will always look out for the result because you just can't help it. It becomes a way of life. And if people go onto Instagram, I've reposted on our page a short clip. It's maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds on our stories currently, and it kind of shows you what the old shed used to be like back in the day. I think I don't know exactly off the top of my head the year that this little clip was made. It could have been in the 80s, it could have been the early 90s, I can't remember now. But it just sort of gives you a flavour of what the old ground was like. And in actual fact, it wasn't as nice as that when I went. This is probably a few years later. The shed was a raucous place to go, and it was a very dangerous place to go, and only the sort of the bravest went into there because it was a real Lions Den kind of experience, and the away fans that used to come to Chelsea only ever used to travel in very small numbers because, again, it was a very tough place to go. And yeah, like Millwall in many ways, you'll never make the station is what Millwall used to sing, and Chelsea kind of had a way of life about them that kind of made fans not really want to turn up to those games because it was a very, very hostile atmosphere. Also, you've got to remember, Chelsea had a running track around their pitch back in the day, which kind of meant that you sat further away, and the viewing, I suppose, experience wasn't as good, obviously, like it is now. But you can understand that that little bit of separation from the pitch was probably a godsend for the likes of Ken Bates and Chelsea, because he probably thought at least there's another 20, yards or 25 yards of space before, if anybody did try and run onto the pitch, they had to go a long, long way before they got there. So stewards might be able to grab them before they got onto the pitch. But yeah, it was an interesting way of life. And I have to say, back then there was just no fear. Your parents and your uncles and your friends that used to go to Chelsea, they always made you feel incredibly safe. And do you know what? It's really weird, but even if you did wander off or something, you just knew where to go. It's madness, I know, but you tended to bump into somebody that you knew, and there were so many different people back then. It was a rural community. I think that's maybe where it's not lost completely, because people still go with their family and friends. But I would say back then it was almost like you had friends by default. These weren't friends that you met down the pub after a game necessarily, but people looked out for each other a lot, and people knew that if they had kids going, they'd always be sort of looked after by somebody, and they'd be, that's Colin's boy, that's Joe. And like, it was just a real sense of community, I suppose. As for me now, I've been married for 15 and a half years. I've been with my wife for the best part of 25 years. We met at school and we stayed together all that time. I have 2 children, 2 boys, Max and Leo. They both play football. Max to a slightly lesser level, but Leo certainly is going to be a top footballer in some way, shape or form. I have no doubt about that. He's got all the tools and the attributes to be an incredible player. And he has that kind of mental toughness. He's got that steely determination, work rate, hard work, skill, flair. He's got a lot of fantastic things, and I sort of have no doubt in my mind that he will play football at some level, because it's in his blood, it's in his genes. He just can't seem to sit still at home. If he hasn't got football in his hands or at his feet, he's just not happy. And yeah, it's quite astounding to sort of look at yourself and then look at your children and go, he's got all what I had, and he plays a slightly different position to me, and he does slightly different things on the pitch to me. But the grounding anchor for us both was that it was football, and winning is everything. And even though as a parent it can drive you mad, I can say to him, it's not about the result today, it's not about this, it's about performance, developing yourself. And if you don't win today, it's not the end of the world. You're not playing for anything, don't worry about it. But the trouble is, I know what I was like as a kid, and I couldn't lose a game of cards, let alone a game of football, without wanting to sort of smash somebody's face in. So if it's in you, it's in you, and you cannot physically take it out. And you hear this a lot about someone like Wayne Rooney when he was younger, or John Terry, for example, where their anger and their frustration would come out on the field in the change room afterwards if they lost the game or maybe blew a lead or something like that. You cannot change who you are. And I think I've got both sides of my boys. One is much calmer and more articulate, very, very expressive in other ways, very bright. And Leo, again, by no means is he not bright. He is bright, but he has that sportsman mentality. And I think that it's just lovely to see from my perspective that at least one of my children sort of took that mantle on as a sports person, because I just think team sport in particular gives you so much. You can't just think about yourself. You have to think about your teammates, whether that's in a smaller team or, in a football side where there's 10 other players, plus there's substitutes and other people as well. So it grounds you, and I think it really kind of makes you understand what being a team member is like. And I think it helps you in life as well as sport. It shows you that at school, for example, or what have you, that it's not all about you, and you need to help other people. And football coached and managed in the right way can give you a lot of good opportunities in life, not just in the game you're playing. Plus, it shows you lots of different sides of yourself, because if you're losing a game and you manage to come back and win that match, for example, it shows you that you and your teammates have got great character, and you don't know when you're beaten. And I think that side of you can't really get from everyday life. I think you need to have an experience, and there's nothing like going back into the changing room, whether you're maybe 12 or 13, or if you're maybe in your 20s, and that feeling of joy is unparalleled, and you will not beat it in anything you do in your life. It just won't be the same. 10 other guys with you, or if you play in a female team, 10 other females with you. That sense of achievement is just so brilliant, and you kind of want to soak up as much of that energy as humanly possible. I myself now work in the golf industry, and I enjoy that very much. I love being part of sport and being involved in something that was going to keep me active. And I think that sense of not feeling cooped up or working in an office isn't for everybody, and it certainly wasn't going to be for me. And I'm incredibly proud of where I come, because after football, it can be a very dark place at times, and I did have some dark moments, but I think that you do learn to come out the other side of it when things don't quite go your way. And not to go into too much detail, but I did have a couple of serious injuries at a time when it was really annoying, to say the least. But you hear about Chelsea players, for example, that have had a serious knee injury, for example, or Reece with these recurring hamstrings and stuff. As it does play on your mind. And I had a bad Achilles injury. I've still carry the wounds from that, and it affects me every day. But there are times when I think I can just play in the Premier League as if nothing has ever happened. But you then suddenly realise after 45 minutes of football that your Achilles are absolutely throbbing, and the chance of you waking up tomorrow morning and even walking, let alone kicking on football, would be slim to none if you don't calm down. So I think when you hear of some of these players that have had these bad recurring injuries and then not coming back, and we sort of go back to Reece James and Lavia being the one that Chris mentioned last week, is incredibly frustrating. And I've sort of jested about Lavia not playing for Chelsea and what have you, not playing 90 minutes, but I'm pretty sure as a professional he is completely and utterly devastated at the way his career has currently gone, because he is an exceptionally good player. And Chris is right. If we can get Lavia fit and roaring in this team, with alongside Caicedo, alongside Enzo and Andre Santos, for example, goodness me, that's going to be an incredible midfield, like incredible. And I do really hope that Romeo Lavia can come back from his bad injury and prove to everybody that he is a good player and he can be consistent and he can stay fit. But I think sometimes with the news, injuries can become a little bit tiresome to the fans that are listening, that, oh, Lavia's injured again. But trust me, it's a dark place. It can be very, very sad. And even though he might be earning a lot of money, I can assure you he is not gaining any real joy out of his life at the moment, because when you're a football player, all you want to do is play football, and currently he's not able to do that. I'll leave it there tonight. I won't be going into a Burnley kind of review, because I think Chris has done that already, and there's not a lot I can add to that, and it's completely fine. So I think all I will say on that is that I think that Chelsea really do not want to miss a trick here. They cannot really afford to lose to Burnley at home or even draw. It can happen. As of recording, I think Arsenal have just blown a 2-goal lead against Wolves. So, yeah, things can happen and they can go wrong. I think we need to remember that. But I think that Chelsea really should have way too much for Burnley, and I will be bitterly disappointed if we don't beat them. However, again, we've all read the script. We've all seen these things before. We know that Chelsea have a hold my beer moment in them. But yeah, fingers crossed, we're discussing a Chelsea win, and hopefully it's a comfortable one.
And before we wrap up this week, we are going to hand over to friend of the show and listener, Declan. Declan has been on the pod before and given us his views under life under Maresca, but we've not heard from him since Liam Rosenior took over. So I thought I'd get Declan on to give us his thoughts on what he's liked so far under Rosenior, what he thinks still needs to be worked on, and yeah, general feelings as we go into what is the crunch part of the season. So over to you, Declan.
So a couple of months into Liam Senior's reign, probably a good time to reflect on how it's gone so far. I think first and foremost, I have to admit I am pleasantly surprised with how well I think he's adapted to the team. I think when he first came in, I had a bit of a fear that he was a bit of a blue cone man, maybe not the right guy for the job, and had maybe got it based more on his connections and his time at Strasbourg rather than necessarily anything that meant he was the guy to pick up where Maresca had kind of left the team. I think on the positive side, we look a lot more fun to watch now. I think by the end of Maresca, Chelsea were turgid. You knew what was coming. 15,000 passes between Trev and Badiashile at the back, inviting pressure, and I think we've been found out. I think by the time that Maresca had gone, we've been found out a little bit, barring a few kind of top-level performances here and there. And so, yeah, it's a breath of fresh air to see. I think a lot more fluid attacking football. I definitely feel that we're a more entertaining team. I think that bears out in the games we've had, right? A few last-minute winners, turning games around. Don't think we turn those games around under Maresca. Do we go 2-0 down or against West Ham and whatnot? Maybe not, but swings and roundabouts. So we're definitely more entertaining to watch. That's a positive. Fundamentally, I think we've had good results by and large. Palmer puts that ball in the other week against Leeds, and I think we're in a really good place. And you can't do much about that, right? That just happens sometimes. And actually, I think he really got his tactics right in the Arsenal second leg. I think the only thing I would say is maybe we could have gone for it a bit more in the last 20 minutes, but you're at the Emirates. It's tough, right? Arsenal are a very good team, very hard to break down. But I think he got it spot on in the first sort of 60, 70 minutes and kind of built up that tension and built up maybe the pressure on Arsenal a little bit. And I don't think Maresca would have done anything differently to that either. So personally, I think actually been quite pleasantly surprised with how he's got his tactics by and large right. I think that we're more attacking and more exciting to watch. I think he's clearly got a bond with the players. I think Maresca didn't seem to have towards the end. I think that's very promising. He's obviously a man of aging or whatever he is. So he's clearly a bit of a man manager, for want of a better phrase. So that's good. To be honest, the only slight drawback I would say is I think defensively we look a little bit shaky and naive at times. 2 goals to West Ham, 2 goals to Leeds, 2 goals to Napoli, which I don't think was a great Napoli team. I know that's probably a bit of a personnel problem as much as a managerial problem, but if there's one slight area, the way I kind of see it is Chelsea have more than enough attacking talent now that Palmer's back, João Pedro's back firing, Estevão, Neto, there's more than enough going forward. Santos obviously playing quite a lot now, which liberates Enzo. Plus, some fantastic fullbacks who can pop up with a goal as well. There's more than enough there to kind of score the goals and win the games, particularly against those weaker opposition. If you just tighten up the back, West Ham should be a 2-0 win. So we get a goal in the first half and then we get a goal in the second half. And if we're defending well, that stuff doesn't happen. We don't have to have the massive clawback. If we're defending well and we're well drilled, we don't have the kind of, period of madness against Leeds. So if I was seeing looking at the run-in, there's a lot of football to play, and I think you've got to kind of stay focused. But I'd be thinking, right, how can I really nail the defensive side of this team? Because fundamentally going forward, I think we've actually looked quite good. And that first half against Leeds, I thought we looked really, really good, really fluid. The most fluid I've seen Chelsea play in an awful long time, actually, probably since the Club World Cup final. So yeah, onwards and upwards. I think he's definitely grown in my estimations. I think we look fun again, which is always a positive when watching football. And if we can just tighten up some of those defensive frailties, get Reece back a little bit as well, which probably help with that, to be honest. Let's be honest. I think going forward we've got more than enough, and I think we're in a good place heading into the final third of the season.
That is a wrap for the podcast this week. We will, of course, be back after that big game against Burnley to reflect, review, hopefully celebrate 3 points, and remember, every little thing's going to be all right. We'll see you next time. Those were the Chelsea notes for this week. If you enjoyed the podcast, do us a favour and share it with a fellow Blue. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review wherever you're listening. Wherever you may be, stay carefree, and remember, every little thing's gonna be all right.